Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl is one of the best movies that everyone seems to have forgotten about. It's one of those rare movies that comes out of nowhere, is legitimately great, and has no previous IP attached to it. Okay, well, a theme park ride doesn't count. In terms of IP, the subsequent sequels turned what was once the hottest IP in Hollywood into another has-been franchise. That's a discussion for another day, but today I'd like to discuss this movie and specifically tell you why the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, The Curse of the Black Pearl, is a modern-day epic. Before I get into the meat and potatoes
and the apples
of this review, I want to get a few obligatory things out of the way. The first Pirates of the Caribbean movie is a bona fide classic, and one that has held up extremely well after 20 years of aging. The characters are great,
we're naught but humble pirates.
the script is phenomenal, the dialogue is fantastic, the casting was superb, the acting was amazing. The soundtrack is one of the all-time greats. The effects, mostly practical, look great even these days. They really blew this up. For purposes of this review, I'm going to mainly stick with the first two, characters and script. The movie is very creative and actually features themes that are far deeper and more interesting than initially meets the eye. I'm going to go ahead and call this a modern-day epic, which is by no means a new term, but it's not a term you hear often. According to the internets, the definition of epic is a long narrative poem in elevated style recounting the deeds of a legendary or historical hero.
What's in your head, boy?
That doesn't quite fit, but the second definition does. A work of art, such as a novel or drama, that resembles or suggests an epic. That's the one I'm going for. An epic, much like mythology, will generally rely on archetypal heroes and themes. What is archetypal? Well, according to the internets, the definition of archetype is the original pattern or model of which all things of the same type are representations or copies.
Who are you?
However, a definition just below that one is a perfect example. Again, that's the one I'm going for.
Excellent work, Mr. Brown.
The Curse of the Black Pearl, in terms of story and themes, relies upon clear archetypes, and the entire ideological conflict of the movie is along the order-chaos axis. Allow me to explain. The Curse of the Black Pearl is a movie about order and chaos, in addition to good and evil. The entire movie has our heroes traversing the Caribbean, engaging in conflicts with both cursed pirates and the Royal Navy. It's the perfect setting for an order versus chaos narrative, getting elbow deep in the gray muck between too much order and too much chaos, and the movie emerges with a clear theme and message. To borrow a line you may not have noticed, but your brain did. Before I dive into my evidence, I'd like to switch from the terms order and chaos to lawful and chaotic. The reason for this is that order and chaos evoke imagery that is more black and white, yin and yang if you will. With terms like lawful and chaotic, it implies a spectrum of virtue where the greatest possible good lies at exactly the middle between two vices. Allow me to elaborate on that statement. The ancient Greeks, when they comprised their four great Stoic virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, accorded these four ideals the title of virtue for one reason. They are acts of moderation. Take, for instance, courage. The opposite of courage is obviously cowardice, lacking in courage. But another opposite would be foolhardiness or recklessness, having excessive courage. To phrase it differently, Thomas Paine put it, I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, meaning fear is essential to the nature of courage. To be reckless implies that there is no fear in that situation, or at least not a clear enough understanding of the situation to be afraid of it.
Here there be monsters.
In either case, there is no courageous virtue in doing something that has no fear in it. Going to the grocery store is not a courageous act. Well, okay, unless you're an agoraphobe. Cowardice is to be overwhelmed by fear. Foolhardiness is the absence of fear, neither of which is virtuous behavior. That's what I mean by a spectrum of virtue. I'd like to present a chart, the character alignment chart. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, with the right being chaotic, the left being lawful, the upper being good, and the lower being evil, with the middle being neutral. Good and evil are basic concepts, but I'll clarify lawful and chaotic further. Lawful means following rules, laws, and other codes of conduct, such as societal norms. A lawful individual will rely on those rules and laws to dictate proper decision making, and they do so knowing that it may be slower or overly burdensome, but it will be more fair and thorough. Chaotic implies unhindered freedom, independence, and adaptability. A chaotic individual will not adhere to any sort of code of conduct but their own standard, and actively acknowledges that there is nothing binding to any agreements made between individuals. To use a specific example, lawful individuals will look at generalities, such as all murderers should be put to death, while chaotic individuals will look at specifics, such as if someone assassinates a genocidal dictator, they should be exalted, not executed. Finally, the movie, in the spirit of making a compelling argument over a thorough argument, has it that an individual can only be one of these traits and not multiple, which makes the chart go from this to this, more of a cross. From that, I'll go ahead and place the key characters in each of the boxes that correspond to them. Given that a character cannot be both good and lawful, or evil and chaotic, this lines up most appropriately. The fact that I have two characters in the lawful and good boxes, I will explain, but I would only ask that you note that our neutral good characters are the versions of themselves only at the end of the movie. If I were to ask you, who is the main character of Pirates of the Caribbean, you would correctly say,
Jack Sparrow, isn't it?
if I were to ask who is the main character of The Curse of the Black Pearl, you would incorrectly say,
Captain Jack Sparrow, if you please.
this movie is not actually about Jack Sparrow, though he is the most interesting character in it. Instead, our protagonist is...
Will Turner.
You weren't ready for that. Well, maybe you were.
Reason's got nothing to do with it.
Will Turner is our protagonist, though that takes a moment to realize. How do we determine this? By asking, what is the movie about? Really, there are two options here. Is it an adventure romance, get the girl damsel in distress movie, or a high seas revenge story? What makes the movie so fun is that it is both, but it is first and foremost a get the girl romance movie. The movie is framed around Will and his transformation from a whelp
I suppose in exchange you wanted me not to kill the whelp.
into a pirate. Kind of. That's why this moment is not the climax. But rather this is.
He's a pirate.
And a good man. At least my conscience will be clear.
You forget your place, Turner.
It's right here. Between you and Jack.
The second moment is the culmination of Will's character arc, and his choice is what leads to a change in three of our other major characters. Elizabeth,
As is mine.
Elizabeth.
Governor Swan,
Perhaps on the rare occasion pursuing the right course demands an act of piracy. Piracy itself can be the right course.
and Norrington.
Oh, I think we can afford to give him 1 day's head start.
Again, what does Jack's killing of Barbossa do in the context of the narrative and the physical conflict? Yet the immediate next scene is Jack at the gallows. If the movie were primarily a revenge story, it could end here and we'd be okay. Maybe not happy, but we would feel fulfilled that Jack achieved his goal. However, we aren't happy if the movie ends there. Will has rescued Elizabeth, but he hasn't gotten the girl. In fact, it's the opposite. She's agreed to marry Norrington, and Jack is about to be executed. That's not resolution. If the movie did end here, and this happened, would the movie have been any good? No, because there's no happily ever after moment. So what does that make Jack? Jack more represents the mentor archetype. Jack is older, more experienced, and more knowledgeable than Will in many things. He has almost magic levels of luck.
This is the day that you will always remember as the day that you...
And improvisational skills. And nudges our hero closer to the version of himself that Will wants to have.
Good man. Good pirate. I swear you look just like him.
Jack also works in conjunction with Gibbs to mentor Will about the Pirate's Code, Tortuga, Barbossa and his crew, the curse, nautical skills,
Commandeer. We're going to commandeer that ship, Nautical Town.
and even to not always fight fair.
You cheated. Pirate.
No fair.
Like other mentor figures, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Dumbledore, who engage their mortal foe and primary antagonist, Jack also has his moments where he engages his sworn rival. Unlike most fictional mentors, however, Jack kills his opponent. Every other time, these sorts of mentor versus antagonist encounters end in self-sacrifice or a standoff, not in the villain's defeat. However, there's a reason that Jack can get away with killing our antagonist. So, if Will is the protagonist of this film, who is the villain? You would obviously say, because he's the big bad guy, whose death marks the climax of the action, if not the themes. He's also obviously a bad guy, being both a pirate and undead. He even represents evil in this movie, according to my handy chart. But what if I told you he's not the bad guy? While his history outside of the story is clearly that of an antagonist, in the scope of this film, he and Will are not foils to each other. In fact, they really only come into conflict because of Elizabeth's capture, not because of any ideological or practical reason. Instead, the real antagonist of this movie is
Commodore Norrington, as he's about to become.
again, another subversion of sorts.
I knew it.
Norrington represents many ideas and ideals in this film, such as level-headedness,
That's not good enough! Mr. Turner, you are not a military man, you are not a sailor.
intelligence,
This is a beautiful sword. I would expect the man who made it to show the same care and devotion in every aspect of his life.
competency,
Sight the muzzle flash! I need a full spread, 4.5. Mr. Stevens, 4 cartridges!
courage,
The rocks! Sir, it's a miracle she missed them.
and ambitious goals and execution.
I intend to see to it that any man who sails under a pirate flag or wears a pirate brand gets what he deserves.
They've long been out of business. Probably have your bloody friend Norrington to thank for that.
However, he represents lawfulness taken too far to where it becomes oppressive, lawfulness that is too rigid to serve true justice.
Then we condemn him to death.
The boy's fate is regrettable, but then so is his decision to engage in piracy.
Norrington and Governor Swan have forgotten that the law was made to serve its subjects, not for its subjects to serve the law. This brings out some of his worst qualities, such as his ambition allowing him to be influenced against his intuition.
Think about it. The Black Pearl. The last real pirate threat in the Caribbean, mate. Can you pass that out?
His strict adherence to his beliefs,
This is wrong.
Commodore Norrington is bound by the law.
and, paramount of all, his unwillingness to see that people who do not share the same ideology as him can be good people.
Pirate or not, this man saved my life.
One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness.
So it seems enough to condemn him.
Indeed.
From the standpoint of the narrative, Norrington is also Will's rival for Elizabeth's hand, and this is just as important for the story. A protagonist is judged by how dangerous their antagonist is. The stronger the antagonist, the greater the obstacle to overcome, and the greater the glory when our protagonist succeeds. Again, nothing virtuous in going to the grocery store. In the contest for Elizabeth's hand, Will is severely outmatched by Norrington. Will is an orphan and a blacksmith's apprentice.
You are a blacksmith.
This means he has no money, no estate, and no clear future. The town already has a master blacksmith,
Just doing my civic duty, sir.
meaning that if Will were to carve out a future for himself, he would need to either leave Port Royal or wait for his master to retire or die. Norrington, on the other hand, is older, more experienced, and accomplished. He is a Commodore in the Royal Navy, meaning he is likely second in command of Port Royal, and perhaps even higher ranking in a crisis.
Governor! Barricade yourself in my office. That's an order.
Additionally, he is hyper-competent, a man of manners and proper conduct,
A marriage to a fine woman. You have become a fine woman, Elizabeth.
Seems to genuinely care for Elizabeth.
I would expect the man who made it to show the same care and devotion in every aspect of his life.
And is generally,
Fine man. It's what any woman should dream of marrying.
to make Will's test even more substantial, a ticking time element is introduced. Norrington proposes to Elizabeth. Her father desperately wants her to marry him, going so far as to imply impatience.
Has my daughter given you an answer yet?
No, she hasn't.
Mere hours after she passes out, falls 100 feet into the ocean, barely avoids dying,
The rocks! Sir, it's a miracle she missed them.
and survives a pirate fugitive effort. The final and most important obstacle for Will to overcome is his own timid demeanor and generally beta male simp attitude.
Miss One.
Will, how many times must I ask you to call me Elizabeth?
At least once more, Miss One. As always.
Elizabeth is obviously smitten with Will,
Will, so good to see you. I had a dream about you last night.
About me.
but is frustrated that he's not the best version of himself.
Well, that Will Turner. He's a fine man, too.
That is too bold.
All of this together means that Will, realistically, has maybe one day to prove he can, 1, get some money or have a future, 2, impress Elizabeth's father,
See? At least the boy has a sense of propriety.
and 3, become the alpha male all women secretly want.
He's a pirate.
A tall task, one that will require something extraordinary to happen for Will to succeed. Now that I've dispelled some major misconceptions,
I'm telling a story!
I can finally get to those meat and potatoes I was talking.
You must be hungry.
If you've gone back and watched these movies as an adult, you probably noticed the first Pirates movie feels more satisfying when you're done watching than the second or third one. Word choice is important here. Satisfying. The second and third movies are definitely bigger, still have elements of fun, build on a lot of elements from the first one.
The code. As set forth by Morgan and Bartholomew.
But what I mean by satisfying is that when the movie is done, you exhale, nod your head once, and go, that was a good movie. The second ends in a cliffhanger, so I'll reference the third one, where it ends on many of the same notes as the first one, yet for a number of reasons, you don't get that same feeling of closure and satisfaction. I'll compare it to how you act when you've had a good meal. The first Pirates movie is this, and the second and third movies are this. Both are delicious, both have the same number of calories, but when you finish one, you pay the bill and go home, and don't need to eat anything else the rest of the night. The other you finish, and then cry into a pillow the rest of the night. To know if a story or movie is going to be satisfying, there needs to be something under the hood, an engine that intentionally drives the story instead of just using gravity and pushing it down a hill. I'd like to reference this image again. While the movie is primarily to entertain and have fun, the movie is also a thesis of sorts. One of the reasons I believe this movie blew up into the hottest commodity in Hollywood for a brief window is because the thesis of this movie was very different than anything that had been seen for some time. The thesis is this: law and good are not the same, and if the law gets in the way of the good or stopping evil, then an element of chaos is needed to reset the balance. That is why Norrington is the antagonist and not Barbossa. Barbossa is the evil in the world, but the film is not critiquing evil, but rather how we modern humans in a society solve the evils that we come up against. The film is warning us that how we solve problems is just as important as actually solving them. Or to phrase it differently, that the ends do not always justify the means. The real conflict isn't here, it's here. This double clash of good versus evil and order versus chaos is what allows a lot of this to happen.
You are a blacksmith. This is not the moment for rash actions.
He was a merchant sailor. A good, respectable man who obeyed the law.
Was a bloody pirate, a scallywag.
My father was not A pirate.
When it's of greatest profit to you. Sorry, Jack. I'm not going to be your leverage. Do anything stupid. You can't. I can.
Why aren't we doing what Mr. Sparrow said we should do? With the cannons and all.
Because it was Mr. Sparrow who said it.
No, it's all by all means. Kill the whelp. Me, I'm dishonest. And a dishonest man you can always trust to be dishonest. Honestly. It's the honest ones you want to watch out for. Because you can never predict when they're going to do something incredibly stupid.
Without becoming convoluted or tiring. So to recap, Norrington is not a bad guy, but he is the antagonist, and Barbossa is a bad guy, but not the antagonist.
Savvy.
That is ultimately what makes this movie so interesting. It never wastes time to further establish themes. Thematically,
Spiritually, ecumenically, grammatically.
throughout the movie we see elements that order is becoming an inhibition to justice.
Then we condemn him to death.
The boy's fate is regrettable. But then so is his decision to engage in piracy.
Pirate or not, this man saved my life.
One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness.
Though it seems enough to condemn him.
Indeed. Mr. Turner, you are not a military man, you are not a sailor.
Even lines like this.
Elizabeth, how's it coming?
It's difficult to say.
I'm told it's the latest fashion in London.
Well, women in London must have learnt not to breathe.
Imply that things are becoming more and more uniform and oppressive. The dress, like an overly ordered society, looks great on the surface, but underneath is filled with suffering and implicit compliance. This line summarizes everything you need to know about Governor Swan and Norrington.
Commodore Norrington is bound by the law, as are we all.
This line also shows that Norrington and Swan recognize that their quest for order has gone too far, yet each seems powerless against the law, despite being the two most powerful men in the colony. That is archetypal oppressive order. So, we understand Barbossa, Will, and Governor Swan and Norrington. So what about our wild card, our chaotic neutral mentor figure?
Well, I trust that you will always remember this is the day that Captain Jack Sparrow almost escaped.
Jack Sparrow is the inciting incident in this story. His arrival in Port Royal immediately begins to upend things. He undermines order at the dock, infiltrates a vessel of the King's Navy,
Hey! You! Get away from there!
and has seen the world.
Clearly you've never been to Singapore.
While that line is meant to merely be clever, Singapore is on the other side of the world, which makes it a symbol of a place beyond the known world. That means Jack has attained knowledge beyond those around him who have never ventured willingly into chaos. Jack is the one who knows intimately the workings of evil.
That night, there was a mutiny. They marooned Jack on an island and left him to die.
But also understands the workings of good.
Probably one of the few who knew him as William Turner. Everyone else just called him Bootstrap or Bootstrap Bill.
Bootstrap.
Good man. Good pirate.
With that knowledge of good and evil, he has chosen the path of chaos as the way to maneuver those two successfully.
You can keep doing that forever. The dog is never going to move.
The whole movie is Jack showing Will that being an obedient slave to order will never get him what he seeks.
Perhaps the reason you practice 3 hours a day is that you already found one and are otherwise incapable of wooing said strumpet.
You didn't beat me. You ignored the rules of engagement. In a fair fight, I'd kill you.
And that's not much incentive for me to fight fair then, is it?
Wait for the opportune moment. Your fiancé will be wanting to know you're safe.
If you were waiting for the opportune moment, that was it.
Additionally, Jack fluidly moves between selfishness and selflessness, always bartering for what will get him what he wants. With his bartering, It's never clear if he fully intends to fulfill his end of the bargain.
Well, Mr. Turner, I've changed my mind. If you spring me from this cell, I swear on pain of death, I shall take you to the Black Pearl and your bonny lass. You'll get another one.
I will.
A better one.
A better one?
That one.
What one? That one? Aye, that one. I'm having a thought here, Bob Answer. What say we run up a flag of truce, I scurry over to the Interceptor, and I negotiate the return of your medallion, eh? What say you to that? What of the Pearl? Name me captain. I'll sail under your colours. I'll give you 10% of me plunder.
And yet, he often displays a sense of altruism that is beyond merely utilitarianism.
Will you be saving her then?
I can't swim.
Throw her to the King's Navy, you. Do not lose this.
Move away. No.
Please move. Think about it. The Black Pearl. The last real pirate threat in the Caribbean, mate. Can you pass that up, eh?
A heart of gold, if you will. All of this brings us back to Will, our protagonist. Will is the archetypal hero. He starts off as a fool, being an utter simp.
Good day. Elizabeth.
An incel.
Who makes all these?
I do. And I practice with them 3 hours a day.
You need to find yourself a girl, mate.
And naive.
You cheated.
Pirate.
As well as hot-headed.
That's not good enough!
And not to mention,
Rash, Turner. Too rash.
throughout the story, he continues his willingness to be a fool by, well, being a fool.
We're gonna steal the ship. That ship?
Commandeer. We're going to commandeer that ship, Nautical Town.
I am us! She goes free.
We've only got one shot, and we can't die.
That willingness, however, starts to yield results, as he learns from his mistakes
No fair.
or learns what works and continues to use them.
That is a wonderful trick.
More importantly, however, he discovers where the line between order and chaos should be. The climax explains everything. With every character still in lawful or chaotic perspectives, Will alone is willing to stand up for what is right,
This is wrong.
for what he believes in,
I should have told you every day from the moment I met you. I love you.
At the end, he becomes the archetypal good man, being willing to die not for an innocent man, but a guilty man.
If all I have achieved here is that the hangman will earn 2 pairs of boots instead of 1, so be it.
Who is also
Good man.
the lawful. Norrington and Governor Swan realize that their strict adherence to the law is suppressing the good,
At least my conscience will be clear.
You forget your place.
and that finally becomes too much for their consciences to bear. Ultimately, Will's example inspires our other major characters. Elizabeth discovers Will is a good man,
No. He's a pirate.
Norrington and the governor come to understand that an element of chaos is always required in a healthy society.
Well, I think we can afford to give him 1 day's head start.
And Jack, well, Jack continues to be Jack, but he gets the satisfaction of seeing everything play out as he intended. The movie does an excellent job of wrapping everything up. We see Will, not the meek, simp, incel Will, but the seasoned, changed, good man who has crossed swords with pirates, led a ship broadside battle, broke a supernatural curse, and discovered his ancestry. This change is broadly represented in his hat.
A really big one.
He has become the chaotic force Port Royal needs.
I thought we might have to endure some manner of ill-conceived escape attempt. But not from you.
Showing that he is in fact the best possible man, having rebuked the overly lawful, defeated evil, and won the girl.
Will. Nice hat.
So, if you ask yourself the question, why did this movie make me want to go out and be a pirate after seeing it the first time? I have your answer. The movie is a thesis, albeit a very interesting thesis, about the nature of good versus evil within the framework of lawful versus chaotic. It ultimately claims that the highest moral good you can conceive walks the line between the two, and that steering too far to either lawful or chaotic ideals will ultimately turn you into the villain. The movie made you want to go out and be that archetypal hero, which is, of course,
A pirate.